Something strange is happening in this valley. Bodies found without heads, no predators, no footprints, no signs of a struggle. The camps are untouched, the food uneaten, and it keeps happening again and again. A national park where the only trail is silence. Locals warned them, officials ignored it, and now there are dozens of missing names and no real answers. So why isn't anyone talking about it? The Nahanni River winds through one of the most stunning and untouched landscapes in the world. Towering peaks, thundering waterfalls, and deep canyons form the bones of Nahanni National Park, a place so majestic it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But long before it earned tourist brochures and global praise, this stretch of the Canadian wilderness held another name, the Valley of the Headless Men, a name carved not by geologists or governments, but by death. This is a story of illusion, of explorers who believed they were chasing fortune, only to vanish into fog, frost, and legend. At first, the valley seemed like a paradise, free land, rich veins of gold, and no one to stop you. But soon, one by one, their bodies were found, and heads were missing. The tragedy of the MacLeod brothers, discovered decapitated in 1908, is often cited as the beginning. But indigenous oral traditions, especially among the Dene people, warned of this place long before white maps acknowledged it. They spoke of an evil wind, of watchers in the trees, of spirits that punished intruders. Historians examining frontier-era expansion note that many such warnings were dismissed outright, lumped in with superstition, even as the body count rose. Why would the land care who walks it? One explorer asked in a letter before he, too, disappeared. That question still haunts the archives. Tonight we will follow the river upstream into uncharted terror, imperial ambition, and what some have called the most cursed place in North America. Let us begin. The dream that lured them in. Frank and Willie MacLeod were not the only men drawn in by the gold rush myth. They were, however, the first whose remains rewrote the map. Their journey was meant to last weeks. It took searchers a year to find what was left. Headless corpses, sleeping bags neatly rolled, no signs of theft, and no sign of their skulls. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police filed it as a mystery. The papers called it a tragedy. Locals whispered what they'd always known. This was not just a case of survival gone wrong. Was it bandits, revenge, madness in the cold? The answers never came. Instead, more expeditions arrived, and more men vanished. Some were found frozen, others burned, a few never found at all. The pattern was clear to those willing to see it, but nobody wanted to believe that the land itself might be claiming them. According to scholars studying Canadian wilderness stories, the Nahanni River became a psychological border between the known and the unknowable, a place where maps end and myth takes over. But what if the myth was always the truth? Because in the next chapter, we descend deeper into the madness of those who tried to tame the valley and the chilling message their deaths left behind. The brothers who lost their heads. They came for gold. What they found was silence and something that didn't want them to leave. In the summer of 1908, Frank and Willie MacLeod, two seasoned prospectors from Fort Liard, set out into the Nahanni wilderness, chasing whispers of a lost mine hidden somewhere along the upper Nahanni River. They were experienced, well-equipped, and confident, but when they failed to return, no one expected the discovery that would follow. A year later, their camp was found by another search party. The supplies were still packed, the tools untouched, the bodies headless. Both men lay near their shelter, one curled as if in sleep, No signs of struggle, no weapons drawn, just the shocking absence of their heads, neither of which were ever recovered. Newspapers sensationalized it, locals grew quiet, and prospectors began whispering of a headless men legend that was no longer just a story. This was no ordinary wilderness death. It was a message. Primary reports from the time, including Royal Canadian Mounted Police dispatches, described the scene as undisturbed. No valuables taken, no animal tracks, no clear motive. According to archival historian Mark Taylor, the MacLeod case marks the psychological turning point when the Nahanni shifted from being a land of potential to a land of dread. But the real horror wasn't just in their deaths, it was in what followed. In 1917, Martin Jurgensen, another prospector lured by rumors of untouched riches, was found dead in nearly the same area. His cabin had burned to the ground, and yes, his body was headless. Again. Then came Philip Powers, a trapper whose body was discovered in his sleeping bag, frozen, untouched, and without a clear cause of death. In the official report, no foul play suspected, but locals once again pointed to the valley's curse. Why were so many dying in the same way? Why were their heads always missing? And why was nothing ever taken? One rehook that keeps drawing attention is the theory that rival prospectors or poachers may have wanted to scare others off the gold-rich territory. But as geographer Susan Lorne notes, there was never proof of any competitive violence, just bodies, burned-out shelters, and severed fates. The media dubbed it the 20th century's Bermuda Triangle of the North. But to the First Nations, this wasn't new. This was the land fulfilling its promise. Were these deaths part of a natural pattern of isolation, violence, and misfortune? Or was something more deliberate, more ancient, making itself known? Before we chase the supernatural, we need to confront the known. Because what comes next isn't folklore. It's documented, and it only gets darker. In the next chapter, we enter the years where entire expeditions vanished, and where the valley itself seemed to develop a taste for fear. Why did men who survived war and winter lose their minds in the Nahanni? And what did their final words reveal? Before we go further, if you're still here, it means something in this story stayed with you. Maybe it's the silence. Maybe it's the unanswered questions. This channel is where we follow those shadows, the forgotten, the unsettling, the truths buried under centuries of noise. If that resonates with you, subscribe, like the video, share it. Not just for the algorithm, but because stories like this should never disappear quietly. Now, let's continue. A valley that eats its own. Not everyone who enters the Nahanni Valley dies. But those who return often come back changed or silent. As the decades passed, the valley's reputation only deepened. This was no longer just the site of a few unfortunate deaths. It had become something darker, a place where survival itself seemed to break down. Even the most prepared were undone by something they couldn't name. By the 1940s, the Canadian government began to take quiet notice. Too many lost expeditions in Canada, too many survival-gone-wrong stories, and no solid answers. Yet official investigations rarely led anywhere. Files closed, quietly. Families got no closure. Meanwhile, the stories kept piling up. In 1945, prospector John O'Brien vanished while traveling with a dog sled team. He was experienced and familiar with the terrain. His body was found frozen upright, clutching a match in one hand, and his sled still packed. There was no sign of struggle, only that he had stopped lighting fires long before death claimed him. According to wilderness psychologist Dr. Irene Wasserman, this case suggests a total cognitive breakdown, often seen in final stage hypothermia, but the lack of disarray remains disturbing. Just 2 years later, a biologist named Raymond Patterson, sent to document the region's flora and fauna, reported hearing singing from the cliffs at night. He survived his mission, but never returned. His journal entries grew increasingly paranoid. In one, he wrote, "The mountains whisper, you must not look too long." It's not just outsiders either. Local Dane and Métis guides, many of whom were raised in the region, have repeatedly refused to enter certain areas of the park, especially the upper river canyons. One area in particular, Dead Man Valley, is still considered taboo by some elders. What makes this place different? Is it psychological? An overwhelming wilderness inducing what early Arctic explorers called snow madness? Or is there something older at work, something that doesn't want to be seen? Environmental data shows that Nahanni's geothermal activity causes fog, strange acoustics, and erratic wind patterns that could disorient even skilled navigators. But that doesn't explain the disappearances. It doesn't explain the decapitations. And it certainly doesn't explain the stories of watchers, figures glimpsed in the trees, only to vanish. If this were happening in any other national park, wouldn't there be a full-scale investigation? Instead, there's silence, no official warnings, no public alerts, only memorial plaques and missing persons reports filed in remote detachments. Haunted national parks are often dismissed as tourist tales, but this one never wanted visitors to begin with. The deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. This land doesn't just reject human presence, it consumes it. In the next chapter, we'll uncover why some believe this valley is more than cursed. It's protected, and those who disturb its boundaries never walk out the same. The warnings we ignored. Long before gold fever brought men into the Nahanni River Valley, there were stories, whispers passed down through generations of the Dean people, warning of a land not meant to be trespassed. Not simply dangerous, but sacred, protected, alive. The Dean had names for the regions where the headless men legend would later take root. Words that translate loosely to land of giants, mountains that breathe, and the place where people vanish. These weren't metaphors. They were boundaries, spiritual perimeters, not meant to be crossed. But colonial explorers did not believe in spiritual borders. To them, indigenous warnings were myths, obstacles to be conquered. And as they moved deeper into the Canadian wilderness, the silence of the valley was interpreted not as a sign, but as permission. According to oral historian Lisa Antoine, the Deni didn't speak of the valley as haunted. They spoke of it as inhabited, not by ghosts, but by forces older than language. Mountains that saw, rivers that remembered, spirits that didn't forgive trespass. The Canadian government, in its expansionist phase, mapped the area without ceremony. Prospectors were given permits. The land was declared empty, legally, spiritually, and historically, but it wasn't. And the land responded. In the 1960s, a geological survey team vanished for 3 days in the Dead Men Valley region. When they returned, they claimed to have gotten lost in fog, but their GPS logs showed them circling the same ravine multiple times, unable to find an exit. One man later said he felt the forest folding in on itself. This wasn't the only account of creepy true wilderness stories. Across decades, hikers have described strange lights, unnatural animal silence, and in one chilling report, a figure standing motionless in the river facing upstream. Why do we dismiss these stories? Is it because they don't fit into science? Or because they challenge something deeper? The belief that nature is neutral, that we are always in control. The Nahanni River doesn't rage, it waits, it doesn't attack, it disorients. According to ethnographer Joel Simmons, the psychological effect of the valley is profound. Its vastness induces insignificance, which may be why so many lose their way. The tragedy is not just in the disappearances, it's in the arrogance. the blind faith that human maps and ambitions can overwrite ancestral memory. And yet, the more we pushed forward, the more the land pushed back. Have you heard a version of this story before? Share it below in the comments, because next we confront the ultimate question. Are these deaths random or ritual? And what if the valley is keeping count? It never stopped. The myth says it ended with the gold rush. The truth is, the valley never stopped taking people. Even after Nahanni was declared a protected national park in 1972, the disappearances didn't end. If anything, they became harder to explain. There were no more prospectors chasing lost mines. No more colonial expeditions claiming land. And yet, hikers, biologists and tourists, people with no agenda but curiosity, kept vanishing. In 2005, an experienced outdoorsman named Trevor Rasmussen entered the park for a solo hike. He'd left an itinerary, carried GPS, and was prepared for the conditions. His last contact was a radio transmission near Virginia Falls. Then, nothing. No body, no gear, no sign of struggle, just an empty tent, food untouched, and footprints that stopped abruptly on a cliffside trail. Official statements attributed it to an accident. Locals weren't so sure. What rattled even investigators was how eerily similar Trevor's case was to others dating back decades. Explorers who vanished without cause, supplies left behind, routes half-finished, and again, no heads. Not in all cases, but enough to cast a long, terrifying shadow over every search. Why does the Canadian wilderness mystery of Nahanni persist, even in the age of satellites, GPS, and digital maps? Scholars offer clinical answers: animal predation, misadventure, sudden weather changes. But none of those explain the repeating patterns, the body positions, the missing equipment, the psychological collapse seen in recovered journals. According to criminologist Dr. Rachel Mears, it's the consistency that haunts us. The deaths are spaced by years, even decades, but they echo. The way the bodies are found, or not found, suggests a pattern more than a coincidence. We like to believe we've mapped the world, that nature has been tamed, but there are still places, few but real, that reject our narratives. Cursed lands in Canada where something resists observation, not metaphorically, physically. The Dean people still warn against venturing too deep, and some of the park's rangers, those who have spent long winters alone in the valley, refuse to speak on record. But privately, a few have admitted hearing screams with no source, or seeing shadows move where there should be none. And then there's the question of why the government does so little to publicize these cases. Why no warnings? Why no memorials for the dozens who've disappeared? Is it tourism protection or something more calculated? One unconfirmed theory suggests the area is still being quietly monitored, that some part of the state suspects what we're only beginning to ask. What if the Nahanni River is not just a place, but a mechanism, one designed not to protect people, but to protect something else? In our final chapter, we confront what's left behind. The bones, the silence, and the impossible question. Is the valley cursed, or is it defending itself? The land that remembers. We call it wilderness, but what if it's memory? The Nahanni River doesn't rage. It waits. It doesn't hunt. It observes. The disappearances in this valley were never random, not if you've seen the patterns, not if you've read the journals, not if you've stood where the footprints stop. They say this land is cursed, that it's a place of lost expeditions in Canada, of headless men legends, of creepy true wilderness stories the government politely refuses to explain. But what if the valley isn't cursed? What if it's guarded? There's something deeper in this story than just gold, or greed, or wilderness gone wrong. It's the same fever that drew another man halfway across the world. Percy Fawcett, the explorer who vanished into the Amazon jungle in 1925, chasing the lost city of Z. Like the McLeod brothers, Fawcett was experienced. Like the others, he believed he was prepared. But both Nahanni and the Amazon don't just take your body. They take your belief. They take your story. Fawcett walked into the green abyss with his son, chasing the promise of ancient civilizations. In South America, a spiritual city whispered through jungle mists, described in an ancient manuscript. He was warned repeatedly. Indigenous elders pleaded with him not to go further east. He went anyway. And like those who entered Nahanni's Dead Men Valley, he was never seen again. The parallels are impossible to ignore. Both men and myths consumed by a land that seems to fight back. Both warned by those who lived there. Both remembered only in fragments, letters, bones, stories that contradict themselves. The City of Gold mystery, the severed heads, the vanished maps. It's the same story in a different jungle. And maybe that's the most terrifying part. According to folklorist Maya Benet, when you see the same legend in two places, continents apart, it's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. It's a warning the Earth itself is trying to speak. Because whether it's the green hell of the Amazon or the icy silence of the Nahanni, these places defy our control. They mock our technology. They consume our dreams. So here's the question. Did Percy Fawcett find a lost civilization and vanish by choice, as some believe? Or did the jungle decide, like Nahanni has done so many times, that he wasn't meant to leave? If this chapter stirred something in you, there's more. Watch our full story on Percy Fawcett and the lost city of Z, the explorer who chased myth into madness. Because some expeditions don't end in discovery. They end in silence. Also, join us as we uncover another crew swallowed by the wild in our documentary on the Franklin expedition. Same ambition, same vanishing, different wilderness. Please share and like this video. Subscribe to our channel. It matters more than you think. And whatever you do, don't ignore the warnings. Good night.